What is up, my people, and welcome back to Technological Journey episode 2. In the last episode we completed the first page of the quest book. We then entered the mining dimension where we made our first steam machines, and we also crafted our first tier 1 primitive circuits. In today's episode we're going to get better ratios on plates, wires and rods that we were crafting last episode. We're going to set up our first simple power infrastructure, begin handling our first GregTech fluids, and craft our very first assembling machine, and much more, all as we enter the LV age.
So let's go back to the beaches where I always make you laugh, to the forest where we found a hidden path, to the summertime of 2005 when we were still alive,
So I have done some work between this episode and last episode. I have rearranged the base slightly into more of a spread out fashion, removing our large structure that we had here. So what I did was I put these drawers up and tried to sort them into reasonable categories. I also claimed these flax seeds from the quest book. These give us string, which are useful for crafting wires early game. I also crafted up a flux magnet, which requires power to use, so I haven't used it yet. But as we're entering the LV age today, we'll be able to use that. I also took a trip to the nether to grab some nether quartz, which we could put in our blast furnace 3 at a time to craft fuse quartz, which is a prerequisite to fluid conduits and item conduits, which I've used here to set up a simple auto smelter where we just put in all of our ores and it outputs them into this chest here. That helped us process our huge backlog of ores, so we no longer have any other than the ones that are in this chest up here. This is going to get switched out today for a multi-block which I have prepared. And talking of multi-blocks, I've got 3 more ones here. I've got the coke oven, the steam oven, and the steam grinder. Steam grinder is like a macerator, and the steam oven is essentially a furnace, both of which run off steam. The final thing I did was I set up this sugarcane farm here, using snad and a redstone conduit with a timer. I originally did this because I thought, similar to Nomi Factory, that you could power your furnaces with sugarcane, but it turned out that that wasn't the case, and sugarcane isn't a fuel. But it's nice to have anyway, even though I've got it turned off, because when we enter the MV age, then we're going to need a large production of sugarcane. We're going to need a large buffer of sugarcane, to produce renewable ethylene. So, as you saw me do in the intro, I set up the 3 multi-blocks that we had there. So we've got the steam oven set up here, we've got the steam grinder set up here. I moved the primitive blast furnace over to this side, so it's not on our steam line. And I also built the coke oven here. Now with those multi-blocks set up, we can get into the first quest for today's episode. So in the LV age here, the first thing we want to do is you want to craft this basic steam turbine, or probably a few of them. And with these basic steam turbines, what we're going to do is we're going to combine it and hook it up to a large bronze boiler, and that will stand as our first means of energy production. What we're going to do after that is we're going to craft the basic wire mill and the basic bending machine. These are the 2 machines here which give us much better ratios for some simple components like plates and wires. As you can see, the bending machine gives us a 1-to-1 ratio for plates from our ingots in comparison to the 2-to-1 that we had previously when we used the hammer in the crafting bench. And the wire mill gives us a 1-to-2 recipe for wires from our ingots, which is much better than the 1 plate to 1 wire recipe that we would have had previously, again using the tools in our crafting bench. And then the wire mill also allows us to craft fine wire at a 1-to-4 ratio from wire to fine wire. Okay, so I've crafted up the 2 basic steam turbines and the bits and bobs that we need to craft the, what's it called, the bronze boiler, I think. I also flipped around our coke oven and our primitive blast furnace and built another coke oven and linked these up here. I'll talk a bit more about what these do in a second. But first, I just want to go over some ratios. So, in order to supply one LV machine running at its maximum capacity, we need to use 1 basic steam turbine. And we're going to power these steam turbines off a boiler, and a boiler can power 16 steam turbines in total. And this is where we're going to be using these coke ovens. So this first coke oven, we will input wood, and it will produce charcoal and creosote. The charcoal will move across to the next coke oven, and it will turn that charcoal into more creosote and coal coke. We're going to extract the creosote on the back of both of these coke ovens, and then the coal coke we're going to extract from this hatch here. Both the creosote and the coal coke we're going to put into the bronze boiler, and then that will be combined with water to produce steam, which will power our steam turbines. So I'm just going to build the bronze boiler right next to this one here. Okay, so I crafted up a steam hatch for the output, but it looks like it needs to be a normal fluid hatch, so I'm just going to go and switch that out now. So now we have everything set up to produce power. I've got the bits and bobs here to hook everything up, and I'm going to just start by placing down an endervoir, which essentially allows us to get an infinite water source that we can extract from. And I've made up some fluid conduits here, so we're going to just need to set these to the right configuration, and that should start to fill up with water. There we go. Now I'm going to link all of these hatches up here so that we can move the creosote across from these machines into this LV input hatch here. And this one has to be LV, and it can't be ULV like that one, I think, because the recipes require 16,000 millibuckets minimum. So if I place that chest down there, that should create a buffer linking these 2 buses up. And if we chuck some wood in here, this should begin to work. And in the meantime, I'm going to set up these steam turbines. I'm just going to set them coming out of here for now. Let's just check that we're within chunks. Yep. So if I place these on here, I don't know if it matters what way these face. Oh yeah, so there we go. You can see the second coke oven's running, which will be doing the charcoal recipe. And we should already have some creosote in there. And then when this one finishes, we should get even more creosote over in here. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Currently not producing anything. Modify throttle. I'm not sure. I'll have to take a look into all of these different things. Oh, so it has to keep the temperature high in order to produce steam. I thought that 2 would be enough to keep this thing running. That's what I said in the quest book. Okay, so I just moved the throttle down to 50%. I'm not entirely sure if that's the best way to go about it. If anybody that's watching this video knows, please do drop a comment and let me know. We have enough steam here to get these 2. Yeah, so this has just reached the necessary heat, and these are filling up with steam, which means we are also producing energy, I believe. Yeah. So the first thing that we're going to use is 4 times tin cable. We are only going to be able to run 4 machines off of this. I'll upgrade to 16 times tin cable when we can, and the lossless cable we don't have access to until we can get superconductor LV wires. And then if we hook these up, this cable should now have energy. So now I'm just going to go ahead and make the 2 machines that I talked about earlier, the bending machine and the wire mill.
I know the story of your life through winter storms and summer skies. There was a time when...
Okay, so now that we have these 2 machines to give us better ratios on wires and plates, I'm going to look at batch crafting some bits and bobs that will get us further through this LV age. And I'm going to start with circuits. So I also made this crafting calculator thing here, which essentially, like using JEI, you can shift click in recipes, and it will help you see the prerequisite items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a processor in here, and as you can see we haven't got the recipe encoded yet, so if I just press R over this and shift click this in, this here is a catalyst. Some reactions, some crafting recipes, especially ones in machines, will use catalysts, but the crafting bench isn't really important, and I don't want it to say I need a million crafting benches, so I'm just going to click this out here. And then these are the rest of the items that we need, and we'll press save. And then if I put a number up in the top here, so I'm going to craft 32 of these, it will tell us how many things we need. And then you can go further by just shift clicking in more recipes, and I'm going to remove that and pressing save, and then it shows you the constituent pieces of that. You can also press the steps button here, and it will show you the different steps you need to take. So even though we've encoded the red alloy wire, here it shows the individual pieces you need to craft that red alloy wire. But if you go to the steps, it will show you just the actual item that you need. So I'm just going to go ahead and encode the rest of these until we get down to the basic materials. You can see all of your saved recipes here if you click the search recipe button, and then you can just click on an individual one here and edit the recipe. Now I'm going to do this with the raw iron plate because I accidentally encoded it to use a crafting bench when now we've got the bending machine, so we have a more efficient recipe. Here we go, so we have the basic pieces that we need to craft 32 primitive circuits. Now one of the recipes I must have accidentally encoded using the tool, which is why it says we need 32 files. So I'm going to go ahead and gather these pieces and just batch craft up 32 processors, and this should be enough processors hopefully to allow us to get a few more key LV machines to help us get better ratios. Right, so it's been quite a while since I last talked to you. In that time I batch crafted primitive processors, the 32 that I was talking about, and then using the same crafting calculator method, I crafted 16 electric pistons and 48 electric motors, both of them LV tier. And I did that because that will allow us to get most of the key early game LV machines. I'm talking about the forming press, cluster mill, alloy smelter, centrifuge. I think the assembling machine requires robot arms and conveyors, which we can do at a later stage. They're not too hard, just take some pistons and some motors and some circuits, which we have. So like I said, it's been quite a while, and I'm not sure how well the time that I've spent playing this in this world is represented in the videos, because I try to chop them up quite quick in the edit. But if we just take a look up here and go to leaderboards and time played, I've currently 14 hours of playtime, which I don't think is too much, might be quite a lot. I tend to play Greg Tech quite slow, to be honest. Most people will probably be a lot further in the time than I am. To be honest, about like 3 hours of that as well was just standing here while I went out waiting for some bits to do things. After creating those machines that I just talked about, I think the next logical step would be to create the gold line. Then we could do assembling machines, although not long after that we're going to need to craft an ethylene line in MV. And the issue I have with crafting these chemical lines, even though they're quite small, is that I would ideally like to place them down the first time in a relatively permanent spot, even if it is temporary in the long term. And the reason for that is just because sometimes they can have a lot of covers and machines that have to be lined up in a certain order, and it can be a bit of a pain to dig them up and remove them. But obviously in order to do that we have to build a base, or we have to start building a base, and I'm not too sure how I want to do this. So I know I said I wanted to build the base in the mining dimension here, but I am actually thinking maybe we go back to the overworld, just because I think the type of base you can build in here, or the type of base that I'm thinking I probably want to build, is doable in the overworld. And it might be a bit more difficult because we might need to do a bit of terraforming, but I think the terrain might actually add to the look of the base. So I'm just going to craft up these machines that I talked about and have a think about what I want to do with these chemical lines, and whether or not we start to build a base now, or at least get a design and sort of plan it out now, or if we build the chemical lines here in a temporary way and then build a base later and then move them all over. Alright, so I made those machines and I made a couple of extra ones as well. I made the compressor, the lathe, the forming press, the cluster mill, the centrifuge, the mixer, and an alloy smelter, and then I also made the assembling machine. So that allows us to get faster recipes and better ratios on things like rods. The compressor is useful for making rubber, because before I was doing that over in the steam compressor, which is extremely slow. The cluster mill I think we need for sheets and foils, which we haven't had to use just yet, but I think we need quite a few of them in the future. The centrifuge will be useful for ore processing, which we'll have to do at a basic level up here to get these second circuits. And then the alloy smelter we'll use for things like solarium, copper nickel, things like that, for the blast furnace and some of these Ender IO machines down here. Now I did decide to skip out on the gold line just for the time being, just because we don't really have that high demand for gold, and we can just smelt precious metal, and even though it's a poor ratio, mining isn't too much of an issue right now. And in terms of the base, I think I am going to build it in this dimension, although what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build a wall around it, or like integrate it somehow into the ground. Just my only trouble with building this dimension is that I think it might look a bit out of place from the outside, because everything's flat, and if you just have one big structure I think it might look a little bit strange. But I think I'll be able to find a way to work around that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just work towards the farming station, maybe the blaze spawner, or maybe the powered spawner, sorry. And the first step towards that is to get some solarium, which we need the alloy smelter for and we've just made. And it looks here like it's soul sand and gold. So gold we obviously get from precious metal. Soul sand looks like it's easiest to just go and mine some in the nether, to be honest. So I'm just going to go grab my excavator and go grab a bit of soul sand from the nether. And then if we just chuck this soul sand in with some gold in an alloy smelter, that should make us up some solarium. It's an 8-second recipe, so it's not too bad. I'm not sure how much we're going to need. Gold will be the limiting factor here, although I don't think we're going to need too much. So we got one there, which will get us the quest. Now, what I want to think about here is what direction do I want to go? So if we want the farming station, then we're going to need to make an electrolyzer to get silicon dust and silicon dioxide. So I think I'm going to go with a vial processor route to start with, which will help us get a blaze spawner, which will give us access to blaze rods and XP, and then, oh, there's other spawners here as well. So yeah, that will give us ender pearls as well. So yeah, I'll just make up a vial processor. Right, so I've got the vial processor, and I also added 4 more basic steam turbines just to help us power more of these machines in parallel. Now I did mention earlier that we were only using 8x10 cable, and even though we are currently running more than 8 machines, I'm going to just stick with this because I think it's rare that we're going to be running more than 8 of these machines in parallel at one time. But this vial processor will allow us to process these different soul vials for different mobs to get their drops and to get experience, and it gives you the soul vial back, so it's sort of a renewable process. And these soul vials are made in powered spawners. This is a multi-block one which you don't have access to yet, but the same thing applies for a small spawner which we can get from the quest book, and you just have to use an integrated circuit to tell it which mob you want your soul vial to be. And in order to get these spawners, you can just claim them from the quest book here, which is quite nice because it means you don't actually have to go through the entire recipe of creating these things, which could get quite expensive. But for that we do need a simple machine chassis, and these require grains of infinity, which is essentially set up down at bedrock level in the overworld, where when a fire entity / block, I don't know what it is, when that extinguishes, it has a chance to drop a grain of infinity. So the best way to go about this at the moment with the resources we have is to just place down some lava at bedrock level and place some netherrack blocks around it to start some fires, and then the netherrack that's on fire should spread to the bedrock, which will also get on fire, and then when that extinguishes it will drop some grains of infinity. And I don't think we have access to any vacuum hoppers or vacuum chests just yet, so I'm going to have to figure out a way of getting around that. Oh no, it looks like we can actually make a vacuum chest. They're quite easy, they just require a pulsating crystal. But I think we'll get into that next episode. That would be where we start next episode. We've crafted up a bunch of components, and we've also just put this mini pathway in here even though it's nothing special. So yeah, thank you for watching. This has been episode 2 of Technological Journey. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you like this episode and the last one. And if there's anything that you want to let me know about, or anything that you think I could be doing better, please do let me know in the comments. Until next time, bye.